The BBC's Director General George Entwistle says the corporation will investigate allegations of sexual abuse made against Sir Jimmy Saville once police have finished their inquiries. He also issued a public apology to the women who've come forward to say they were sexually assaulted by Jimmy Saville while on BBC premises. With the latest, here's David Silito.
At the time, his image was that of the eccentric DJ with a heart of gold. 40 years on, the BBC today said sorry for what we didn't see, in the light of accusations of sexual abuse against teenage girls.
And I would like to apologise on behalf of the organisation to each and every one of them for what they've had to endure here.
The police are leading the inquiries, but the Director General of the BBC told Radio 4's Today programme the corporation would, at the right moment, carry out its own investigations.
When the police have finished everything they have to do, and when they give me the assurance that there is no danger of us in any way compromising or contaminating an investigation, I will take it further and ensure that any outstanding questions are answered properly.
Another question put to him today was why Newsnight didn't broadcast its report on the allegations last year. He said today that when he was in his old job as the head of BBC Television, he was told in early December that Newsnight was investigating Jimmy Saville. Helen Bowden, the BBC's Director of News, said it might have had scheduling implications for him. George Entwistle insists no pressure was applied to Newsnight, but on December the 5th or thereabouts, Newsnight dropped the investigation for editorial reasons. On January the 29th, BBC Two broadcast How's About That Then?, an affectionate tribute to Sir Jimmy Saville.
But what about the women at the centre of all of this? They have received now a promise of an investigation and an apology. So, is that it?
These incidents are alleged to have taken place many years ago, but an expert in such cases says they can sue if they had good reason for not coming forward.
They will have to provide evidence that suggests there are good reasons as to they might have feared coming forward. They were told initially that they wouldn't be believed, or they were led to believe at the time that they made their disclosure that you're making it up.
Meanwhile, Scarborough has removed its recently installed Saville's View street sign, and the Jimmy Saville Charitable Trust told us via video link it's considering dropping his name.
Collectively, we are absolutely shattered by all these allegations. We just want to know the truth. This is not the Jimmy Saville that I knew, that any of the trustees knew.
A month ago he was Sir Jimmy Saville, the much-loved charity fundraiser. That reputation tonight is in shreds. David Silito, BBC News.
The BBC will examine the allegations surrounding the late Sir Jimmy Saville once the police investigation is complete. The corporation's Director General confirmed the claims will be looked into as he's apologised to the women who he say sexually assaulted them. The scandal has sparked questions about the culture at the BBC in the 1970s and 80s. Julian Drucker reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special Christmas edition of Jim will Fix It.
A regular fixture of the BBC schedules, Sir Jimmy Saville was one of the corporation's most treasured stars. Now, after a week of abuse allegations, the BBC is taking action. Speaking for the first time about the scandal, the new Director General, George Entwistle, said there'll be an inquiry, and he said he was sorry.
The women involved here have gone through something awful, and it's something I deeply regret. When the police have finished everything they have to do, and when they give me the assurance that there is no danger of us in any way compromising or contaminating an investigation, I will take it further and ensure that any outstanding questions are answered properly.
Some women have now also spoken of a culture at the BBC which apparently tolerated sexual harassment in the 1970s and 80s. One MP says the new inquiry needs to look at these wider allegations.
We need to know if it still exists, because there are people that are saying that that culture still exists today, and that means that young women are still being targeted within the BBC, and that wouldn't be right.
The former detective who investigated Saville for this TV documentary today told me he's now been approached by the alleged victims of other personalities.
And are some of those people BBC people?
There'll be undoubtedly some of those at some stage who have worked for different broadcasting organisations. It would be wrong of me at this stage to say who they are, because quite clearly if those allegations are correct, it's right that they go down the criminal justice system and the police investigate them.
This street sign commemorating Saville in his hometown, Scarborough, has now been taken down by the council. And the Jimmy Savile Charitable Trust is considering changing its name to remove all references to the star. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
Well, with me now is Peter Saunders from NAPAC. That's the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. And Peter, we appreciate you coming on the programme tonight. We've now got several women alleging that they were abused by Sir Jimmy Savile. The police and the BBC are now launching investigations. Are you surprised by the scale and the speed that this story is unfurling at?
I'm not really surprised, Emma. Most survivors of abuse we hear at NAPAC every day from many survivors of abuse often keep it a dark secret for much of their life. And it takes sometimes a story like the Jimmy Savile allegations to actually kind of reawaken people's pain and suffering, and they need to come forward. And this is in a week when we're grieving the disappearance of a child of 5 years old, so it's not just a historic problem we're talking about here. We're talking about what do we do to our children.
Truly terrible situation, and I understand that you've had many hundreds of calls just this week on the back of these allegations.
We've had absolutely, we've been inundated at NAPAC. We have a free phone support line, as you know, and a website that survivors can look at if they need support. But yes, it's been quite unprecedented, the number of people coming forward, and it's left us with a headache, obviously, because our resources are quite limited, and we're getting many hundreds of people wanting help. Do you think that Jimmy Savile's alleged behaviour is typical of someone who abuses children? Sadly, everything that I've read and seen and heard, it is extremely sadly typical of an abusive pattern of people who groom their victim and then abuse, and then typically the victims keep quiet for many years to come. And we've had so many celebrities from the BBC and other places this week coming forward to say that they kind of knew something was going on, and we've got to say, well, why didn't you speak out a long time ago? I have to say there were also plenty of people who are coming forward saying they didn't know anything about it, who worked on the BBC at that time. If it is true, how did he get away with it for so long, and would he have acted alone? Well, again, some of the allegations that are coming out now are that he was not alone. My understanding is that something like 40 women so far have come forward, and certainly at NAPAC last week we heard from some of his alleged victims, and certainly some have been implicating other people. So I think there will be some worried people at the moment wondering if their names are going to come out, and I hope that they do, and I hope that the police deal with this. And do you think this has something to do with the culture back in the 70s and the 80s? I mean, could this, on this scale, happen today with CBR checks and all the other bits of legislation that we have in place? I wouldn't say that it couldn't happen again today. It's still a subject that we don't like to talk about. It's still a subject that's very painful and often swept under the carpet. But I just hope that survivors coming forward, contacting NAPAC, speaking out, hopefully that will help to keep our children a little bit safer today. Peter Saunders, thanks very much for your time tonight.